Good afternoon. My name is Scott Bybee. I'm from Tech Data Services, and I'm here today to talk to you about Talos. In particular, I'd like to talk to you about our new release coming out tomorrow, actually, the 29th of June, where we've furthered our Docker integration story and made a push into our first platform as a service integration. In this case, it's OpenShift. Very soon we plan to extend that to IBM Cloud Private in the upcoming release and continue to push more and more into these platforms as a service and helping customers take their traditional on-premise middleware and move it into the cloud, into a platform as a service, into a public cloud, etc. So today I'm not going to give a general overview of Talos. There's lots of videos out on our channel that I would point you to. Easy to find. If you look for Tech Data Talos on YouTube, you should find it right away. Lots of overview videos and so forth, and you can learn a lot more about our tool. Today, I want to show how Talos can assist in that migration journey that we see a lot of our customers taking. This idea of traditional middleware on-premise moved into a microservices-friendly runtime, into a scalable solution, containerized, and moved out into a public cloud setting. So, to that end, I have a demonstration today. We'll focus on some IBM runtime environments, the idea of moving from IBM middleware WebSphere Application Server in this instance to an IBM microservice-friendly runtime Liberty on Docker out into OpenShift. So before we get into that, I have a couple of slides just to level set. The obligatory what is Talos slide, where I want to tell you a little bit about Talos very briefly. For those not familiar with Talos, Talos is a product offering from Tech Data Services. It is very focused on middleware configuration management. We can discover a variety of middleware, up to 15 different runtimes, pull those configurations back, create templates, so things like WebSphere Application Server, WebLogic, JBoss, appliances like an F5 appliances or Data Power. We can create templates, a very normalized approach to avoid the need to write a variety of scripts. So we can create a template around the configuration that we can then push into an orchestration engine. We are orchestration engine agnostic. We integrate with a variety of them. We are also integrate with a variety of cloud providers. And we handle the day-to-day configuration management of middleware. The idea behind it is to provide the intelligence to work with that middleware, avoid the need to write scripts, and create a single approach to configuration management across all that middleware and allow you to deal with it in a consistent way. What we're going to talk about today is this monolithic to microservices transition leveraging Talos. So in the demo I'm about to get into, we will discover a monolithic middleware runtime environment. In this case, it's WebSphere Application Server. In that environment, I have an application running. It's called Dictionary App. We will pull that configuration, the entire configuration of WebSphere down. We will then create a template around, an application-centric template around this application. It will include the deployable options around the application itself and the application, as well as a data source that it depends on. So we'll create an application-centric template. We will then take that WebSphere Application Server template and transform it over to a Liberty template automatically within Talos. We will then link and deploy that to Docker. We'll create an image around Liberty, link that template into Liberty, and generate a localized container with this application now running on Liberty, and we'll show that running locally. Finally, we'll then push that image out into OpenShift and run a deployment in OpenShift, so that we can see that same application running out in a PaaS, a cloud platform that is OpenShift. So we will go from on-premise, show that it's running there. We'll move it into a containerized running environment on-premise, and finally we'll push it out into the cloud. So in essence, we'll take that application from a shared monolithic environment and have containerized it and moved it out into a cloud. So without any further ado, let's get into the demo itself. I've got this VMware image running locally that has Talos running on it already. Let's start by introducing the application. It's frankly a very simple application. It's called Dictionary Web. I won't show much more than this because I just want to show that we have this application running out in WebSphere Application Server today. It's a localized WebSphere Application Server. Let's just look at our applications, and you'll see in this interface that we have WebSphere just wants to show slowly. This dictionary web, it's shown as started. It is running here. So our first step is going to be to discover this running WebSphere environment that is running locally. So in Talos, to do that, we come over to our middleware instances and we click on this Discover button. We'll place this out in our dev environment. Over here you can see we have a dev, a production, and QA environment with a variety of different middleware and appliances that we've previously discovered. Let's focus on discovering this particular middleware. So we'll call this WAS9 for lack of a more creative word, because it is WAS9, WebSphere Application Server 9. I will come down and select discovering it using SOAP. We will give it a host name, which is localhost, provide the credentials. And finally the SOAP port. We can also connect over an SSH tunnel. You don't have to connect directly on SOAP. It's an option, but oftentimes things are blocked via firewalls and so forth. In that case, we could have provided details around an SSH connection. So here we are running a job. We can run a variety of jobs in parallel. In this case, we're running a job to go out and discover that piece of middleware so that Talos can then begin to manage it. After we initially discover it, we can then read the configuration back. That'll be the next step. We're making a SOAP connection out to that runtime environment. It will then continue to connect to it and discover the topology of that environment. So this is what this job is doing right now. It's coming through and discovering how many clusters, the nature of the installation path for this, and so forth and so on, so that we know all about the topology and how to connect to this WebSphere Application Server itself. Okay, we can see this job is now done. It took a couple of minutes to run. We now can click on the Done button, and we can see that we have an instance now running out in the environment, or sorry, an instance that was discovered. We can see the topology. We can see there's a single node with a JVM running, etc., and we can see it's running under the dev, and it's right here. What I want to do now is click on Reconfiguration. When I click Reconfiguration, it's going to pull back, basically, it's going to connect out to that instance and pull back all the configuration details that you can see in a WebSphere Administrative Console. This will then give us a palette, if you will, that allows us to select the components that we want to turn into our dictionary app template, right? So we'll end up selecting what the application deployment options itself, as well as its dependent data source. We'll pull that back, we'll tokenize on it, and I'll continue that in a moment. Let's let this job run. It takes a couple of minutes, so we'll pause the video here while it continues to run this job. Okay, our project is done. To read in that configuration, the job that was running, you can see that it read in all the various artifacts in the WebSphere runtime environment, data sources, etc., etc. We'll come down to the bottom. We'll click Done here. We'll come to our middleware instance. We will now create a new WebSphere Application Server template focused on this dictionary app. So we'll call this DA2, Dictionary App 2, because I believe I already have a Dictionary App 1 template from a previous run that I had done. Here we can see all the various configurations available in this WebSphere runtime environment. Let's quickly grab this dictionary app. So this is its deployment options that I can then tokenize on. In this case, we're not going to tokenize on any deployment options in this particular app, but it also has a data source that we're dependent on. We'll go ahead and grab that data source. It's a MySQL data source. So we'll click under the data sources and we'll find that MySQL data source. We'll go ahead and pick that guy up. He's down here. We can go and find our properties, and let's go ahead and tokenize on just a couple of things that we suspect will change from environment to environment, because that's a typical scenario that a database data source is going to connect to a different database depending on where it's located. So the port number might change, for example, so we'll go ahead and give this a variable that we can then tokenize on. We'll call it jdbc dot dictionary db, because that's the JNDI name, dot port num. Some nice little name that we can reference. I like to use a namespace. It's a type data source. Here's the unique name, and here's the value that we're looking for, because you may end up with a lot of different properties inside this particular template, and you want to be able to distinguish one from the other. So we know this is a type data source. Which data source? The dictionary DB. Let's go ahead and grab the server name. It's in alphabetical order, so let me just scroll up. I passed it up. The server name as well, and I think that'll be enough for this demonstration. So let's go ahead and grab this guy down here. We're going to go ahead and grab the value here, create a variable here, and we'll call this jdbc dot dictionary db dot server name. Save that. So we have this template now. We'll go ahead and we've got two properties here. I can find it in the configuration up there. We can see it tokenized there. We can find this one. He's down here. You can do the opposite. You can find a reference down here. It's a nice way to sort of correlate the properties with where they're found in the configuration. I'll hit save and close here. This application, sorry, this template is now linked to this middleware instance. It's called DA2. We can generate a payload. We can look at that payload. We can see that we only have this particular dictionary app and this resource in here. We could always link this guy out to different instances here. So for example, I could add him to a production instance, or I could add him to a QA instance. We're not focused on that in the video, but let me just quickly show this so that we can see that it can be linked to various middleware instances. I have a template-centric view here. Instead of that was from the middleware viewpoint, but I can click on the template itself, and then I can see that I've now linked it to dev, production, and QA. And we can see all the values in these different environments. I can edit this guy, and then I can turn around and basically manage this template. So for example, if I decided, I can see now that I only have the data source and the app, but if I want to overlay it to an environment that I pulled it from, I can pull in other aspects that I might want inside of this template. We'll skip past this right now because we're not focused on these features. This is available in other videos. Let's click back on the template, and let's go ahead and transform this template over to a Liberty template. So I'm going to click on templates. I'm going to click on DA2 here, and I am going to transform this to Liberty. So I kind of call it, that name works for me. We'll call it DA2_Liberty. It's going to run a quick job to then transform the underlying template to a format that Liberty will accept. So if I hit edit on this new Liberty template called DA2_Liberty, we can see that the format has slightly changed. Earlier I had a JDBC reference and it was in a different location. Now it's under a server XML file, because that's how Liberty associates all the resources under this server XML, and I can see that I have this data source down here. I still have my tokenized values. The values are down here in this Liberty template, and I can see the tokens here. So everything came over, the data source for MySQL, as well as the dictionary app. So I'm going to save and close this. So now I have the original WebSphere template, and I now have a new Liberty template. Our next phase, our plan is to go ahead and create a container, an image, a base image within Docker based on Liberty. We'll call it DA2 because I already have a DA1 Docker image out there. We'll give it a version 1. We tell it what is the middleware type, in this case Liberty, and what is the base image we're basing it on. It's going to be CentOS, and let's define how we want that Liberty runtime to look. Let's just define a server. We'll call it DA2, for lack of a more creative word. Hit next. On the second page, we want to associate our template, right? So we've got this DA2 Liberty template. I can give it property sets. Remember in the WebSphere world, I had mapped it over to a dev, a QA, and a production instance. So what I'll do is I'll add a dev, a QA, and a production property set so that I can turn around and manage different back-end resource references for the data source in the case that I want a dev, QA, or production instance of that container. So we'll give it a port number each time. For lack of a, doesn't matter because we're actually not going to connect to this database. I'm just going to give it different numbers for variety's sake. We'll give it those numbers for now. We'll give it a name dev DB, we'll give it a name, QA DB. We're not going to actually run the app. We just want to show it move around, and we'll just pull up the URL to show that it's running without actually connecting to the database. That's not the point of this demo, so we'll just give it some data here. So we've got our references here. I'm going to go ahead and add another one because later when I push this to OpenShift, we need to disable this command point. This is another template that we have. So I've got 2 templates associated with this Docker image. These are the activities. We have a concept called activities. Activities like install, patch, stop a server, apply a template, and so forth. And these are the build activities. So we want to install Liberty and then create the server whenever we build the base image. And these are instantiation activities. I could add more if I wanted to, but for now I just want to apply all my templates and then start the server. So this set of activities will run to create the base image, and these activities will run every time that I create a container based on that base image. I'm going to go ahead and hit save and build image, and it's going to run a job that will then build out that base Docker image with Liberty in it and associate those templates with it so that when I create a container and instantiate it, I'll have my dictionary app running on Liberty that was running on WebSphere Application Server previously. Okay, I paused the video briefly just because I hate to watch a wizard go by, a job running by. You can see it started at 12:01 and it took about 3 minutes to create this base image. The job is now done. We hit done here. We've got out now under Docker a dictionary app 2 Liberty-based base image. Let's go ahead and create a container based on that. We'll give this container a name DA2. We'll just be consistent with our naming convention. We've got to use a variable set. Remember, we created 3 variable sets. Let's create a dev instance. So it'll use those properties for dev, so it'll instantiate a dev container. We've got to map over our ports. We're going to use a port of 9080. This is the runtime port, and we want to bind it on the VMware image so that when we go to the port via the VMware image, it'll be on 9081, but on the container port, it'll be 9080. So we'll bind 9081 to 9080. We'll hit OK here. It's going to instantiate that container locally. And we can see it running here. Once we have this container running, we actually have the ability to read that configuration back and update our templates, right? So we can link these templates out to native running environments or containerized environments. We can select a golden master, modify it in some meaningful way, and pull that back in, create a second version of the template, create a second version of the base image, destroy all our containers, and then reinstantiate them based on a new version. So this concept around creating a golden master and in one environment and then propagating that out to various containers is certainly a theme that we've had in our native middleware, and it's extended into our containerized environment. Let's go ahead and find that URL. It's probably still coming up, but we can make an attempt to get to it. So we'll start by seeing if it's available on 9081. That would be the Liberty instance. So I'm going to click 9081. We get the Liberty landing page. Now let's go ahead and try to get to this dictionary app URL. This was, remember, the one that's running on WebSphere. It's still running out on port 20,019 in WebSphere, and this is running on our container. So let's give it a URI, a dictionary web. It's not quite running yet. That happens a lot whenever you first bring it up. It went out, you can't find that. So give it just a minute or two. Same problem. Liberty is running. Let's see if we can get to the app now. Still coming up. Aha, we're a little further along. It can't find the context route yet. Do a refresh. Should come any moment now. Yep, now it's reaching WebSphere Application Server itself. And probably the next refresh or so should bring my dictionary app up. There it finally is. Again, it takes just a minute or two for it to come up within the container. But now we can see that we're running localhost 9081. That's a connection out to this container that's running here. I can manage that container, read it back in, update it, reinstantiate a variety of dev, QA, production containers, and so forth. So we've moved now from this application being in this environment to this environment, this application now being out on a Liberty instance here, running in a container, right? So we've moved it over. The next step is to move it out into OpenShift. I've got an account here on OpenShift. I've logged into it. Within Talos, I can select this instance and I can say push it out to OpenShift, right? So I'll click this little button and it begins to run a job. This job is pushing this image out to OpenShift. So this base image will become available on OpenShift so that I can then select it and basically create a deployment config off of it. And it's the same concept that I was doing locally in the containers, but out in OpenShift. So I'll create various deployment configs where I can connect to the dictionary app out in our paths, which is OpenShift. I'm going to pause the video here because of my bandwidth limitations. It's going to take about 12 minutes to push this image up into OpenShift, and rather than have a bunch of dead space for you guys to watch, I'll make a pause. Okay, continuing with our demo. I've paused it. I've now started the demo. The recording again. We can see it started at 12:08. This job continued and it ran until 12:14. That's actually a little better time than I expected. About 6 minutes it took to push this image out into OpenShift. So if we click on OpenShift over here and we go into our resources here, and we have a look at our builds, and we go to our builds images here, we can see that we have, well, it says no build images, but we do have one. Let's try, we don't build. Let's go on images. So we've got our DA2 image that we've just pushed out 2 minutes ago. We don't have any application deployments yet, unless I didn't delete them last time. We do not. So we now have, if we go back over to Talos, we hit done here. We can see under our Talos project, that's an OpenShift project that we have this base image called DA2. It's also tagged DA2 to say this one has been pushed into OpenShift. We've got the little OpenShift logo to the right so that we can know that that's now available inside of OpenShift. Now I want to go ahead and create a deployment config off of this, right? So it's a very similar scenario to when we created the localized container. We'll give it a name. We'll call it DA2. We're sticking with this theme. We want to choose the image stream name. It's DA2 as well. We want to choose which version of that. We've only got one version at this point. And the variable set again. So we're doing a dev instance, a QA instance, and so forth. So we choose the right set of properties. Now we need to give it a route name, DA2. A service port that we want to run, 80. And the target port, which is 9080. Hit OK here. So we want to run it locally on 80, and the target port on the container will be 90, just as it was in the container world. So this is going to take a couple of minutes as well, because it runs out and instantiates a deployment config. We can go over to OpenShift and see it in action here. So remember we have that image here under Applications. We have a deployment that's ongoing. We go into deployments. Now we have one running, right? So one deployment DA2, it's running. It's got version 1 here. I can click on it here. We can see if we have any pods stood up yet. Once we do, we can obviously check the URI again. So we've got one still running a minute ago. We click on that version here, version 1, the first instance of it. And we can see we have one pod actively running. Come back over to Talos, and we can click in and we get a little bit of information about that running container. We have the pod showing up here. It says that its status is complete. We've got a URL to reach it. So if I click on here, I should get, not quite yet. It's not, this often happens. You got to give it a few minutes for it to become available and everything to settle. So I will hit refresh here. Now we can already see Liberty, so we've made progress. So let's move this tab over here to the end. So we have our progression of availability of our dictionary app. First we had it here, This is our localized WebSphere instance that's running here. Then we have it on our container, right? Let's go ahead and give this the URI here of dictionary web, right? And we can see that it's running out on the container. That maps back over to this particular running container that's here. And finally, the third one we have is out in OpenShift. Now we will try it one time now, and then we'll wait a little bit longer because sometimes, again, just like on the container, it takes a few minutes for it to settle. Let's try up faster than I thought. So we can see in our third one, we have the dictionary web app running out in OpenShift. So local was moved over into Liberty on a container and moved out into OpenShift, all automated via Talos. Now, a couple of closing comments on this demonstration. We have accelerated very quickly moving by transforming this application and pulling its related configurations like a data source automatically from WebSphere over to Liberty, married it to Docker, and then pushed it out into OpenShift. It should be mentioned there is additional work involved in obviously making your app ready for running on Liberty and out on the cloud. We're not going after reconfiguring the application itself. So your application should be ready for Liberty before we can then automatically move it. There are a variety of tools out there that do analytics on the application to make sure that the various frameworks and stuff that are supported in Liberty are supported by your application. You can do, there's a variety of tooling from IBM where you can analyze your applications and know if they're able to move into Liberty. Once you've made that determination operationally, we can then lift and shift it out into the container. And more importantly, on an ongoing basis, with Talos, we can manage our on-prem solutions, right? So we've got all these different runtimes from Portal to Tomcat to Liberty to Data Power, and we're managing them on a day-to-day basis, right? We're discovering them, pulling back our configurations, pushing them into our orchestration engine as part of a broader DevOps strategy. Now, you can take a handful, pilot, or maybe you've got a scenario where you've got some developers working offshore out in a PaaS like OpenShift or even on-premise and using Docker. We can then move on an ongoing basis. We can move, take this dictionary app example. Perhaps in production, it's running on a shared WebSphere on-premise environment, but you have developers out in another location that want to run it in Docker. We can, on an ongoing basis, deploy into WebSphere as well as transform and push that out into Liberty. Or you have a pilot where you're slowly transitioning things out into Liberty. In an ongoing way, we can then manage the on-premise and push it out into, say, OpenShift or a container on-premise in an ongoing way. So we can push two directions here, or we can lift and shift the whole thing in a one-off migration and move it into Liberty. So as you can see, we've extended our middleware, and we continue to extend it out into, as the world's changing to microservice-friendly, PaaS-based, platform-as-a-service runtimes, we are helping our customers take their configurations that are on-premise, their traditional middleware and appliances, and containerizing and moving them out into a PaaS. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. We've tried to highlight some of the new features. Again, due out tomorrow, the 29th of June. And this concludes our video. I appreciate you taking the time to watch us. Thanks. Bye.